Hey, my friends, how's it going? It's good to be back. I loved it. I feel like I say this all the time. I loved all the comments. I loved hearing from you folks. After last week, it was a great time. Today, we're going to talk about this Donald Trump criminal trial. It's an angry subject for me because I don't think it's something that should have been brought, and it shouldn't have gotten to this point. And I'm going to explain why and kind of the intricacies of this criminal trial and how it went and everything. Kind of sad news over the week with the passing of Bill Walton, UCLA great and a basketball legend. And then one of the things I wanted to share, he had a big medical malpractice case when he played for the Portland Trailblazers. He according to him, he broke his foot. So he had a break in one of the bones in his foot. And the doctor back then, instead of treating it correctly, having him sit for a long time, doing a surgery, doing a physical therapy, he had him keep playing and just gave him painkillers to the point where his foot got worse and it never healed correctly. And then he ended up suing that doctor. Kind of a big case back in the 70s and early 80s. There was sadly, the bummer about this is they ended up settling for a big amount, but it was undisclosed. So we won't know. What do you think? He played for the NBA for about 5 or 6 years, but he could have probably played a lot longer. And it was because of this injury. And he played for here's a trivia. He played for guess what team he played for after the Portland Trailblazers? Yeah, San Diego Clippers. Look at Mateo here with this basketball knowledge. Yeah, the San Diego Clippers. To this day, I am upset that the Clippers left San Diego. Wouldn't that have been awesome if we had an NBA team here in San Diego? Instead, they go to Los Angeles, which I swear they're like the 5th or 6th team in Los Angeles. You know, the Lakers are way above them, the Dodgers, the UCLA Bruins, the USC Trojans, all these teams are ahead of them. They should have stayed here. Anyhow, whatever, it is what it is. And in other news, this is a topic we've covered here in a podcast a couple times. The Alec Baldwin is going to go to trial. He filed a motion to dismiss his criminal case, which the judge denied. Now, I've said it here that I think he is guilty of manslaughter, Alec Baldwin, because in a movie that he co-produced, he ends up accidentally shooting and killing. It was an accident. It wasn't, on purpose. He shot and killed a videographer. He was using a live gun with a live ammunition as opposed to, fake bullets. And I went over this in a couple of podcasts that, he was a co-producer. He was in charge of hiring, firing. No pun intended on that. All right, hiring, firing, kind of like deciding what staff. They cut a lot of corners. There was a lot of warnings that what they were doing were wrong, and that there was all these safety concerns and safety violations. They just were careless about everything and kept the movie going. And then there was when they were rehearsing for his scene, he used a gun that he thought had blanks in it, but then ended up having real bullet. And then, tragically shot and killed the videographer. Already, they had a lady that they had hired to do the armory, to kind of like to check everything. She was already found guilty of manslaughter. And I think Alec Baldwin is next. I think that trial is going to be interesting in July. Now, one thing about that trial that's different than the Donald Trump trial is that they will actually allow cameras in Alec Baldwin's manslaughter case. All right. To this day, I can't believe that they did not allow that for Donald Trump's case. I think that is the biggest problem with this whole New York case against Donald Trump is that there was no cameras. Like even everything that I have to rely on, like today there was closing arguments. I have to rely on what the media says about it in the sense that how the media is saying, what the lawyer said, what the demeanor was of the judge at certain times, because there's no cameras. Now, I say this over and over. New York they're just cheating the public. There's no transparency in the Donald Trump criminal case. And for that reason, I think the whole thing is corrupt. But more so, we'll go over the actual case. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is what Donald Trump is being tried for in the state of New York. It is not for paying hush money. Like what happened was, he had an affair with this Stormy Daniels. It was a long time ago. So they did their thing, whatever. And then close to the time of the 2016 election, For some reason, he wanted to make sure that she didn't go public with the story that they had an affair. Not that, I mean, it's not illegal to have an affair. So everything so far is definitely not illegal. Now, what I don't get is why he has to pay her to not tell the story of the affair. To me, that sounds like extortion. What do you think? If they had an affair and it was totally legal, right? And that she wants money to not go public about it, what would you call that? That's extortion, right? I mean, he should not have to pay somebody money to not go public. Either she goes public or she doesn't go public. But the last thing we want to do is have her say, okay, I want $130,000, and then I won't go public with the fact that we, slept together. So he was being, in my opinion, I think that's just black and white extortion. Like as an attorney, I would never go to somebody and say, hey, I have a client that that you slept with, or your client slept with, and she's going to go public now that you're running for president. She's going to go public with the story unless she gets to a couple $100,000. Like I would not even in good faith do that. And I'm a lawyer, damn it, and I still wouldn't do it. You know what I'm saying? I still wouldn't do that. That's how bad I think that is. So I think he got extorted. Now, what happened was, his lawyer, Michael Cohen, said, I'll pay it and I'll just expense it. And that's kind of what he did. So Michael Cohen paid it. And for reasons that I cannot believe happened, is Michael Cohen, these conversations that he was having with Donald Trump, he secretly recorded it. Now, to me, secretly recording an attorney-client communication, that is also something I would not do. I can't imagine a lawyer. Well, he's been disbarred, so he's no longer a lawyer. I could see why, pulling shenanigans like that. So he agreed that he would pay it. Now, this whole case it's going to come down to what happened after that. So he supposedly pays Stormy Daniels $130,000. And then he paid like another $50,000 to an internet company that did like internet work for Donald Trump, which was totally legal. All right. So that's $180,000. So he said, okay, I'll expense that $180,000 and then I'll add another $180,000 to build in a profit for myself for, doing all this work. That's $360,000. And then I'll add on another $60,000 for, my time and effort, blah, blah, blah. So he charged Donald Trump $420,000. All of this are things that, are not in dispute. So he charged Donald Trump $420,000, and he charged him that in 10, I'm going to have to do a little math, 12 invoices of $35,000 each. So that's it. That's the whole case. He charges him 12 invoices. Now, the reason why we're here and we're going over this case is then Donald Trump, believe it or not, paid that money, okay? Like he ends up paying it back. So I don't see anything happening that is wrong, except for then the state of New York says on his little business ledger, he wrote it down as a legal expense, okay? Which in a way it makes sense to me, is he paid who? He paid his lawyer. So anytime you pay a lawyer, in my opinion, that's a good argument to call that a legal expense. What the state of New York is now saying is,
no, well, this was more or less done to help your campaign. So instead of calling it a legal expense, the only thing you did wrong was you shouldn't have called it a legal expense. You should have called it a campaign expense.
And that's it. To me, this is a selective enforcement problem here. They're not, there are these laws that say, you can't try to, you can't go after a certain race of people all the time for one particular legal issue, or you can't go after, like you make a law, but you only enforce it against, people of this religion. Here, it's a little different. It's like they wouldn't have gone after, in my opinion, anyone other than Donald Trump. Like they really wanted to get Donald Trump about this. So in my opinion, it's like they selected Donald Trump to go after him, probably because they don't like his politics and what he stood for and all of that. I just don't think that's proper. I don't think it's a proper reason to bring this case. If this is something that the state of New York always brings against people, something like they audit someone's business records, not for purposes of taxes and not for purposes of election fraud, but just for the heck of it, and then go after him. I think that is, I do think that is a selective enforcement problem. But the problem, okay, the theory is this: if they're going after, there's all these cases where the prosecutor, let's say we're going after like a certain race of people for like loitering laws or for jaywalking laws or something, like minor things that they only prosecuted certain people over. The Supreme Court of the United States has said, okay, you cannot selectively enforce something where the protected class is some race or a religion or a gender or anything like that. With Donald Trump, it's like they went after him for his political views, which, believe it or not, is not a protected class. So even though I think it's selective enforcement, I don't think that is where Donald Trump will win this case on an appeal. So the witnesses they call, the first and one of the important witnesses is David Pecker. I looked it up. That actually is his last name. I actually thought that maybe that was a stage name or something. No, that's his last name. So this guy was running tabloids and things like that. And he's the one that kind of would be in charge of negotiating this kind of like, let's buy this person's story and then pay them to kind of like keep it shut. All right. In essence, in my view, it's like paying the extortion money. So they had to call him, and his whole purpose for testifying is to show, all right, the money that Donald Trump paid, the intent behind it was for the election, like to help him in the election. That was the intent. The intent was not for, when I say personal, meaning like it wasn't to, for, better family relations or anything like that. It was all to keep his election hopes going. All right. So that's what David Pecker testified to. They had to get a witness named Hope Hicks. So she was like kind of the leader of the campaign for Donald Trump back in the 2016 election. And by the way, this is the 2016 election we're talking about. This is 8 years ago. All right. So she was the campaign, kind of the head of the campaign there. So she also testified. She actually helped Donald Trump and did not help the prosecutor. She testified, yeah, part of the reason why I could see why they didn't want to pay, or they didn't want that story, the Stormy Daniels coming out, is because it would have hurt the election. Like this guy had an affair with a stripper, while he was married. It didn't look good. It could have hurt his campaign, but it also, he didn't want that story to go public because the guy is married and it could have, impacted his marriage. I don't know which marriage he's on, third, fourth, something like that. Well, anyway, it could have impacted that marriage. It could have been kind of embarrassing for the family. So she actually did say that some of the reasons, some of the intent behind this was also for those reasons. And then what I can't figure out for the life of me is then they also had to have Stormy Daniels testify. I'll say this, the whole country would have been different right now if this was televised. Because they're asking the stripper questions like, did you have sex with Donald Trump? Did he wear a condom? What was he like in bed? Like they asked her that. Like, why is any of this important? Or why is it relevant? They're spending millions of dollars and they're asking a former stripper about her sex life with Donald Trump. The reason why they're doing that, I think, is because they're kind of showing that this whole thing happened and they have to prove it happened. And then they have to prove that why she extorted him for that money. And they're not prosecuting her, by the way. They're prosecuting Donald Trump. So she extorted him because they did indeed have sex. And that's why then she got paid, just to kind of keep the story quiet. Then comes Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer. What he testified about was that he paid $130,000 and then expensed $400,000+, which I would think that's kind of high for even of a lawyer to expense, right? All right. So he's just claiming that I expensed it because that's just, I paid $130,000, but I charged Donald Trump $260,000. That was my extra fee for it. I paid off another bill for $50,000 for this internet company or something, and I charged $100,000 for that. So what are we at? That's $360,000. Then I charged another $60,000. So I built up all of that. So I had invoices for $420,000, and then I sent them invoices. But in reality, it wasn't for legal work. It was just for this hush money stuff. So Donald Trump knew that all of this was a sham and that he's not really paying me for being a lawyer, but he's paying me to shut this girl up, and keep the story quiet. So that's what they had Michael Cohen testify about. What I love is how the Trump lawyers, what they said about him in closing arguments. They called him the GLOAT. Guess what that stands for? All right, this is so genius. All right, Tom Brady's the GOAT, greatest of all time. So they called this guy, Michael Cohen, the GLOAT, the greatest liar of all time. Okay, because he just lied. He lied about like so many things. He went to prison for lying. He lied to Congress. He lied, to court. He lied on his taxes. He lied about everything, right? And now he's testifying about how he lied and how he defrauded. Like he's saying, no, those are fake invoices. They're not real legal invoices. They're fake and they're totally fraudulent. And Donald Trump was in on it. Like he knew that when I sent him 12 invoices for $35,000 and I put, this is a legal expense, Donald Trump and I knew that it wasn't really a legal expense, that it was really a campaign expense, which, right? That's why they needed all those other witnesses to testify that, no, this was not a campaign expense. This is why I'm at a loss for words right now, because the case is so stupid. That is what this whole thing is about. This is what New York is spending tens of millions of dollars and shutting down the whole state legal system almost just over this. So if the jury believes that the whole thing was a campaign kind of motive, and that when he charged him all this money, it wasn't really for a legal expense, then the jury could rule that Donald Trump misclassified that business expense by calling it a legal expense because he was paying off his freaking lawyer. To me, I think that if a lawyer sends somebody an invoice, damn it, and the invoice says for legal expenses and you pay that invoice, I think it's okay to call it a legal expense. See what I'm saying? Like that's what it's going to come down to. All right. So that is what he testified to. Now, the closing arguments actually happened today. And unfortunately for me, because it's not recorded, I have to rely on the media outlets for the closing arguments. So let's see. This was, like I said, this was some genius stuff that the Donald Trump lawyers came up with. And that's about calling Michael Cohen the GLOAT, the greatest liar of all times. Now, other things that they said to the jury that could resonate with the jury and could prevail for Donald Trump is they said, look, the bottom line is Cohen was a lawyer and he was Donald Trump's lawyer, and he created 12 valid invoices for $35,000, and Donald Trump paid legal invoices for $35,000 each and called it a legal expense. And they also said there's no evidence that Donald Trump was actually the person that was writing the checks, in the sense that because he has millions of checks that are coming and going and expenses. Mateo, when you become a big shot, you may not be paying all your bills. You might have the little people.
I'm not paying my bills now.
You're not paying your bills now? All right. And later you may be paying your bills through other people, right? So they have to prove that first, all these invoices Donald Trump himself knew about and that Donald Trump himself paid, all right? And that he knew there was like a wink kind of agreement that all of this was fake. They said that also there's absolutely no evidence of any intent to defraud anybody because the funny part is that they were just doing something that was legal. There was nothing illegal about this. Except for maybe so if he just didn't write this as an expense, let me think this way through, because to this day I can't understand how New York would have wanted Donald Trump to do this, so he got extorted. He paid $130,000 and he paid it out of his own pocket. That's the other thing that's killing me. They're not saying that he paid it from campaign expenses. What they're saying is he paid from his personal account something that should have been either paid for by the campaign, or he should have listed it as a campaign donation. Okay. So in essence, they're saying he should have paid his campaign that money, and then the campaign should have paid to have that story shut. Can you imagine if Donald Trump used campaign money to pay off Stormy Daniels? I think that would have, if I was his lawyer at the time, I would have said, no, if you want to pay her off with your own money, that's fine. But whatever you do, don't pay her off with campaign money. Like, don't do that. There is a little side note that it is the campaign that's paying for all of Donald Trump's expenses and legal expenses. So he has spent something like $100 million on legal fees in the past year, and all of that is not paid by him. It's paid for by the campaign, thanks to the state of New York, because the state of New York is saying this was a campaign expense, right? So therefore, he's allowed to have the campaign pay for all of his legal defenses. Okay, I'm going to make a prediction here. The jury is going to come back and say Donald Trump is guilty, but then there's not going to be any punishment. Maybe like a small fine that they'll levy against Donald Trump, because in essence, there's just a rule that says in somebody's own business expenses, they have to like have accurate ledgers and accurate business expense documents. And again, this isn't like he underpaid his taxes or they're not charging him for election fraud, even though they were telling the jury during closing arguments things like this whole thing was done for the election, which I do think it's accurate. I think Donald Trump probably cared more about the election and that's why he wanted to shut up this story and pay the extortion amount, as opposed to doing this for personal reasons. So I do think it's kind of like, okay, fine, the guy crossed the street illegally. That's what I think it boils down to. They're spending more money than they would on a homicide case for what amounts to something little more extreme than a jaywalking ticket, which jaywalking in California is now legal. You know that? I love it. Or I'm sorry, it's not legal. It's just not illegal. Anyway, that just means like you can't get ticketed for jaywalking, even though you're not supposed to do it. And if you get hit by a car, you may not be able to recover because you're not supposed to be jaywalking. So I do think this is going to be my prediction. I think the jury is going to come back. And if I'm wrong, I'll be the first to say I'm wrong. I think the jury is going to come back and say he's guilty because, but like I said, who cares? It's like they're not going to prosecute anyone else for the same exact things. And they're not even going to get a prison sentence. I think they're just going to say, oh, there we go. We found him that he didn't accurately describe his expenses that don't even matter because we're not going after any sort of tax issue or anything like that. I would love to hear what you think. And I'm hoping that this comes out before the verdict comes out. For all I know, the jury could deliberate in 5 minutes and say he's guilty or he's not guilty, or they could take a long time. Hopefully this comes out before, and you heard it here first. All right. That Donald Trump will be found guilty. But it'll be, the actual sentencing will be like you owe the state of New York $100 or something. Okay, maybe it'll be more than $100. It'll be something that low. I would love to hear what you think about it, and I'll see you folks next week.